Hello guys, my name is Nash. Welcome to Thursday Tales of Terror, TTT. It's going to be a very frustrating case today. We're going to be talking about one of the most hated men in Korea. The case happened in December 2008 in Ansan, Korea, but members of the public were only aware about this case in late September 2009, which was almost a year later. I believe it was because of the law in Korea, which states that for any crime which involves or relates to minors, the media are not allowed to publish it, be it whether the person carrying out the crime is a minor or if the victim is a minor. So the media only published about the news in 2009, and when netizens got to know about this case, they were enraged. So what exactly happened that made the netizens so furious? On the 11th of December 2008, a girl by the name of Na Young was on her way to school. Just to put it out there, Na Young is not her real name. It was around 8:30 in the morning. The incident took place in a church, and just to put this across, this case has nothing to do with the church. There is no connection whatsoever with religion and the church, but it just so happened that it took place there. So while Na Young was making her way to school, she met 57-year-old Cho Do-sun, and as she was walking past him, Cho Do-sun then struck up a conversation with Na Young. The conversation was a little odd because Cho Do-sun asked Na Young, "Are you not heading to work?" And Na Young replied, "No, I'm not going to work, I'm going to school." And Cho Do-sun asked, "How come you're not working?" And at this point, Na Young was a little confused. She didn't know what to say to him because obviously she was just an 8-year-old girl. How could she possibly be working? And it was just a very uncomfortable situation to be in for Na Young. Cho Do-sun was also looking quite restless. He was looking right and looking left, and Na Young was beginning to feel scared, and so she decided to just move quickly. But as she was doing so, all of a sudden, Cho Do-sun covered Na Young's mouth quickly with his hands and dragged her to a nearby church. He further dragged her into the church toilet. And December in Korea is usually really cold, and especially so for public toilets because they don't have heaters installed. So I can imagine the toilet that Na Young was being dragged into, it must have been super cold. Just a disclaimer, from here onwards I'll be talking about the sexual assault and abuse, so if you're uncomfortable you may want to skip this part because the details are really quite disturbing. So in the church toilet, there is a toilet bowl. Cho Do-sun put the cover down and he placed Na Young on top of it. When Na Young was sitting on the toilet bowl, Cho Do-sun took off his pants and forced the genitals into her mouth. She was struggling against him and even started crying. He then asked her to take off her clothes, but of course she refused and she cried even harder. Frustrated, Cho Do-sun hit the 8-year-old girl's face several times with his fist. After he had hit her, he grabbed her hair and he pulled her face close to his and started biting her cheeks. He bit so hard that her flesh could be seen. After that, he made Na Young stand up, lifted the cover of the toilet bowl, and he grabbed her by the back of her head and he started shoving her head into the toilet bowl. And he did that repeatedly. He would pull her head out and then force her head back in. And of course, at this point, all Na Young could do was just cry. She couldn't fight him. She was so small, and the more she cried, the more he hit and slapped her. It was apparent at this point that Na Young was not going to stop crying. She was absolutely in a lot of pain and she was terrified. Cho Do-sun then decided to strangle her until she fainted. After the poor girl passed out, Cho Do-sun took her clothes off and raped her multiple times. The assault was so horrendous that at one point, her organs were spilling out from below. He then took a toilet pump and tried to shove her organs back in. This resulted in severe damage to her internal organs. And no, if you think he's done with what he's doing, you're wrong. After he shoved her organs back in, he continued to sexually assault her. After he was done, he left the tap water running to get rid of evidence because there was blood everywhere on the floor. Like I've mentioned earlier, December in Korea is really cold and he just left the girl on the floor with cold water running. This whole incident lasted for about 30 minutes. After Cho Do-sun fled the scene, it wasn't that long until Na Young regained consciousness. She tried to stand up but she had difficulty doing so. But Na Young, she was a strong girl. She was slowly making her way out of the toilet. According to sources, she crawled her way out slowly and then she tried to look for help. Eventually, she was spotted by people in the area and they were panicking and in shock because Na Yeong was really in a terrible state. She had blood all over her, she was bruised in the face, and she was just very weak. They hurriedly called the police and the ambulance. Not long after, the police and ambulance arrived and Na Yeong was taken to hospital for emergency treatment. Initially, the police wanted to bring Na Yeong to a place where the building itself has a police station and a hospital. They wanted to question Na Yeong so that they could immediately carry out the investigation and find the suspect. And at the same time, she would get treatment from the same place. But upon seeing Na Yeong in that horrible state, they decided to just send her to the hospital. Even though the building has a hospital-like facility, it's not going to be enough to get Na Yeong the emergency attention that she needs. That was how bad it was for Na Yeong. Now, this was considered a huge miracle because Na Yeong actually survived. She had to go through 8 hours of surgery. Cho Do-sun's rape resulted in permanent injury to Na Yeong's abdomen, lower abdomen, and pelvis that required at least 8 months of intense treatment. The permanent damages done to her body has since been categorized as third-degree disabilities. A doctor even said that her organs were so damaged that it was actually black when they found her. Na Yeong lost 80% of her colon and will need a colostomy bag to collect waste from her body for the rest of her life. However, she underwent a successful surgery to implement an artificial anus and she needed a few years to adjust to the implant. And needless to say, this had really impacted her mental health. As a result of the attack, Na Yeong suffered depression and mental stress, and she would often get panic attacks if she recalled or made to recall the incident. Na Yeong's father even had to quit his job to care for her. During the investigation, the investigators had difficulty finding evidence because Cho Do-sun left the tap water running to get rid of evidence. But from here, they were able to conclude that this incident was not the first time that the suspect had committed a crime. So they went through their records, and as they were doing so, the forensic team was able to find fingerprints, and this led to the arrest of 57-year-old Cho Do-sun. Cho Do-sun was born on October 8, 1952, and he has a long list of criminal records. He dropped out of middle school and in 1970, he committed his first crime by stealing a bicycle. 2 years later, he was sent to a youth detention center for extorting money from a street stall. In 1977, he was sentenced to 8 months in prison for habitual theft, and in 1983, at the age of 31, he raped a 19-year-old woman, and as a result, she needed 30 days of treatment to recover. He was only sentenced to 3 years in prison for this crime. After his release, he was fined several times for various violent crimes, including the assault of a bar hostess. In 1995, while drinking, Cho Do-sun assaulted a man in his 60s to death. But because he was deemed feeble-minded, he was sentenced to 2 years and admitted into a psychiatric hospital. Despite all this, Cho Do-sun's wife had nothing but praises for her husband. She said that he would cook rice and side dishes and do the household chores and has been doing it for the past 20 years. He has never vented his anger, and according to her, he was hailed as a polite person. His wife also said that Cho Do-sun only committed the crimes because of alcohol. And for most of his crimes, he would often give the excuse that he could not remember what he did because he was drunk. Now, Na Yeong's blood was discovered on his shoes and clothes, but despite this, he insisted that he didn't remember anything. Cho Do-sun then claimed that he was drunk from the day before the attack, and hence he had no idea what he did. And Na Yeong's mental stress continued to worsen. Firstly, the prosecution questioned her right after she came out of surgery and made her sit upright for a long time, even though she was carrying a colostomy bag and needed to lie down. The session was unnecessarily lengthy and it was prolonged due to the prosecutor's inexperience with the electronic equipment used to videotape her answers. In fact, they had forgotten to press record, which forced Na Yeong to answer the same questions 4 times. Secondly, the prosecutors also failed to show the arrest videotape of Cho Do-sun, which would have eliminated the need for Na Yeong to take the witness stand. As a result of their mistakes, Na Yeong had to testify multiple times in front of her attacker with a hole drilled in her stomach and 80% of her organs still bleeding. That required her to wear pads that soon became entirely smeared with blood. And this was during winter. She had to be out in the cold going back and forth from the hospital to the court and vice versa. Na Yong's parents then filed a lawsuit against the prosecution for subjecting their daughter to physical and psychological distress. And in 2011, they were awarded 13 million won, which is about $11,700 in compensation. The court ruled that the prosecutors violated the interview policy of sexual assault victims by forcing the girl, who was 8 years old at the time, to testify in court despite her serious condition. Now let's head back to Cho Do-soon. When appearing at the Seoul High Court, Cho Do-soon dyed his hair and wore spectacles to disguise himself, apparently so that Na Yong wouldn't be able to recognize him. Initially, Cho Do-soon was sentenced to life imprisonment, and during the trial, when the defense lawyer asked Na Yong if she could smell any alcohol on him, she replied yes. And because of this, his sentence was reduced to only 12 years. After that, he must wear an electronic anklet for 7 years and will be under tight supervision. His profile will also be on the list of public sex offenders online for 5 years. The court said it took into consideration that Cho Do-soon was drunk and thus was weaker mentally and physically. Cho Do-soon also wrote over 300 times to the judges of his trial, "I am not the type of a sick monster who rapes an 8-year-old girl. I was under severe influence of alcohol. It destroyed me." Despite the light sentence, Cho Do-soon appealed claiming it was too harsh. A higher court dismissed this request, upholding the initial ruling. And if you didn't know this, under Korean law, when an intoxicated person commits a crime, the court can reduce a sentence. Because if you're drunk or intoxicated, it means that you are not able to make proper judgments. Lighter sentences for violent rape are not uncommon in South Korea, as lawyers use drunkenness as a defense and the courts take these arguments into account. Public opposition to this law has grown in recent years, but so far has not succeeded in overturning it. Cho Do-soon's name was cited over 6,800 times in petitions registered with the Presidential Blue House website. Many of them oppose his release, calling for a retrial and urging tougher punishment for crimes similar to his. A December 2017 petition arguing against admitting Cho Do-soon back to society drew over 600,000 signatures. A year after the assault, Na Yong had been receiving psychiatric treatment and was said to have recovered about 70%. She even started attending school again. According to her father from a report in 2020, the family can only watch children's cartoons at home together. They would not watch the news completely to avoid any chance of seeing something sexual assault related, as she would collapse upon hearing anything about sex crimes. The family also could not move away as his daughter really depended on her friends, classmates and teachers. Na Yong's father also revealed that his daughter has to wear diapers at home as she's no longer able to control her bowels properly due to organ damage suffered during the rape. After serving 12 years in prison on December 12, 2020, 68-year-old Cho Do-soon was released. He was greeted by an angry crowd who called for him to be castrated and had eggs thrown at him. Some 150 protesters also turned up when Cho Do-soon arrived at his home in Ansan City, with some 100 police officers dispatched to maintain order and keep him safe. Na Yong's family is said to have moved to a different part of the city, although I'm not able to confirm whether they did, as it's not easy for them. It's ridiculous that Cho Do-soon still chose to return to Ansan City, where the victim lived. Police said they will, however, monitor Cho Do-soon round the clock, with officers skilled in martial arts dispatched to patrol the area around his house. At least 15 new CCTV cameras have been installed in this neighborhood and street lamps made brighter. A bill was also passed to ban sex offenders of minors from going near schools and leaving their homes at night and during hours when students commute to and from school. Ansan City officials are also trying to bar Cho Do-soon from buying alcohol, impose a curfew on him, and preventing him from going near children's facilities. Let's hope that this monster will behave and not commit any more crimes. I also do believe that a 12-year sentence was too light of a punishment for someone like him. What do you guys think? Also, this case was so high profile that it was adapted into an award-winning movie named Hope, which drew 2.67 million viewers in 2013. You should really watch it if you haven't. As always, stay safe everyone. Thank you for being with me this Thursday, and I hope to see you guys again next Thursday. Bye!